Tomorrow is the 15th year anniversary of the assassination of Jean Dominique. There's been a long and complicated sort of course of around the pursuit of his killers, and that continues. But it's also now, over a decade since the film was made. And so I guess I thought first we could start by thinking for you to think back to this moment of this film and what has transpired since, and how you see, both maybe things that have changed or things that are still the same, and that this film continues to speak to. So.
Me?
Yes. Yeah.
You?
You?
Oh gosh. Honestly, I think I really have to defer to Gigi and Michèle because in the 10 years since the film was made, things have gotten so much more complicated to me, an outsider in Haiti, that I stopped being able to channel my concern. I just didn't know what to do anymore and what to care about anymore. Things just got so difficult, and then, anyway, so I really don't know what to say. I never give up hope for Haiti because the Haitian people are so extraordinary. And, gosh, it's mind-boggling at the moment. I mean, one example is that when the assassination was first being investigated, and witnesses were being killed also, that there appeared on the scene a really amazing, what they call investigative judge. In Haiti, first a judge takes responsibility for the possibility of a case. And he does a tremendous amount of homework to see from his point of view, is there a case that can be tried? And the judge that the Jean Dominique case went up with was, correct me when I go wrong here, you guys, but it was a man named Gasson. And man, this guy was a hero because he was just steadfastly on it. And he was daring to connect the dots. And finally, I think he received so many death threats. Is that what happened? That he had to actually finally leave Haiti. Now, in 2015, you can pick up the New York Times and read the story about the chaos that exists in terms of the government of Haiti, which is led, of course, by the former pop star, Sweet Mickey. And in reading the story, you read about all the new corruption. By the way, nothing happens in Haiti that doesn't happen here in our great country. We've got so much corruption ourselves. It's just a little bit more focused in Haiti, I think. I don't know about you. So anyway, now you can read this story in 2015, and who is the lawyer for one of the most, egregious sounding characters enjoying the benefits of the corruption from the palace? It's Cloudy Guisan. Well, that means he's a human being, one of the most flawed species on the planet. I'm going to stop now, but that's the only reference point I can put. How could my hero turn into that, And I don't want to condemn him because he hasn't been charged or tried or anything like that.
Well, I would say after 15 years, a lot of heroes have become villains. However, I see two rays of hope 15 years after Jean's assassination. The first one is what is happening here today, yes. Is the fact that we have the archives of Radio Haiti here at Duke. And that there is, the website is called Radio Haiti Lives, and it does live, and you have, of course, it's the beginning, and we're just starting it out, but thanks to Laurent, and thanks to so many like Laura Wagner, we have something going. We have Radio Haiti back on the air, in a way, and young people, are just going on Facebook, picking up the sounds, and commenting on what was said 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I think it's because essentially the issues are the same. A lot of the young people don't know, maybe, the price that was paid for freedom of the press. And this archives really is a way to show what was paid and what was what is the end result and why it is important to defend the only thing we inherited from the fall of the dictatorship, that we conquered after the fall of the dictatorship, which was freedom of the press and freedom of association. Those are the two things, the only thing that we actually made us a more democratic country. So that's, to me, that's one good thing 15 years later that Duke right now is having on a website, the Radio Haiti archives, which for a lot of people, as I said, are not archives. They are the living reality of Haiti today. That's one thing. The second thing, 15 years later, I feel that things are becoming clearer, amazingly enough, on the judicial front. The reason is that it's another unfortunate circumstance. In 2003, there first was a decision by a judge that was indicting only people who had actually carried on with the crime, had really killed Jean Dominique or were accomplices. And in 2003, Gigi and I went to a court of appeal and we said we do not accept that decision because Jean Dominique killing was a political killing and it had to be paid for by someone, organized by someone. And then in 2003, the justice system supposedly started looking for the intellectual authors, that's how they call them in Haiti, of the crime. And amazingly enough, it's only this year that it's starting to move. I mean, last year it started to move. One judge from the appellate court came up with assigning blame to people who would have been responsible for organizing the crime and paying for it. And to me, that was a major development. Whether the people who are charged are really the ones who did it, to me, it's irrelevant. What is relevant is that those people can be heard in front of a court of justice. And so far, we have always been on the investigative level. We have never gone beyond. And to me, 15 years later, what is important is that finally a very important witness came forward. He testified in front of that judge. That judge came out with an indictment mentioning 9 people, 3 of them accused of having actually engineered the crime. About 2 months later, that main witness, who used to be the head of security in the National Palace, was killed. 2 weeks ago, an interview was broadcast of that man talking about what he says happened. Right now, this man can no longer testify because he's dead. However, we have suddenly, 15 years later, a court of public opinion that is actually talking about the case again as if it happened yesterday. So to me, those are 2 major developments which make the 15-year mark a significant one.
I want to add one thing because just the mechanics and the intellectual authors and the architects of the murder. Just one thing which we came to realize was true, I think, unless it's been changed. But the people that shot Jean were South American assassins who flew into Haiti on a private plane very early that morning, were picked up by 2 Haitian drivers who took them to Radio Haiti, and they committed their act. And we've come to believe, unless this has changed, that they got back in the cars, the South American assassins got back in their cars, were driven to the airport, to the private landing strip by the Haitians who were engaged to have them, and neither of the South Americans left Haiti. They were killed before they even got on their plane. 2 weeks later, the drivers who killed the South Americans were dead. Is that true?
We don't know. We don't know, but it's the version of the actual assassin having been killed. And we have a whole chain of people, of witnesses that have disappeared or that have been lynched. One of them was lynched in a police station. Another one died of a wound in his buttocks, which was in a hospital bed while he was under custody. So there is so much has happened in that case. At a certain time, all the files had disappeared. In fact, twice. Once, the Minister of Justice came out and says, sorry, 80% of the papers that we had of the testimonies and all the documents that we had have vanished inside the higher court, Cour de Cassation. Then after the earthquake, when I was in Haiti, they told me that there was nothing, everything was under the rubble of the judicial palace, and that there was no way anybody could be tried for Jean's assassination. In the meantime, the people who had been in jail had fled the country. They had fled jail. So thank God to human rights groups in Haiti, we systematically gathered the whole investigation carried on by Claudie Gasson. And one day I brought the whole file to the judge and I put it on his desk and I said, here it is. Don't tell me there are no documents. And I have to say the judge did a fair investigation and until they finally got that witness to testify. Of course, the witness is dead now. But it means that things are not. This is probably the longest case in Haitian history of a judicial, Jean refuses to die.
Yeah.
So.
Let me ask, so one thing about this film, right, is that it's traveled. We talked about how it has legs at dinner, that it sort of traveled for those who care about Haiti, but also for those who care about the U.S. influence in the world, for those who care about journalism and freedom of speech and the combat. And, I don't want you to be immodest, but, as a kind of sense of how this film, why do you think this film has captured so much and captured so many people's imagination? And maybe, I don't know if you have thoughts about having made it. In seeing the film, realizing this is, it's been a long time since the three of you have been together, but there's a real sense of family, right, and love and affection about this story that connects, you behind the camera and the two of you. But it's been a remarkable testament to how stories can, continue to live on. But so I don't know if if your own corpus as a filmmaker, or if you as participants in the film see, or if you envisioned at the time that this film would have such a long life, maybe when you were making it. But
no, we had no agenda whatsoever about this film. We had no, and maybe someday it will. All we knew was we had to finish it. Just very quickly, I made a documentary in Haiti in 1987, and it was 1 year after the ouster of the flight of Jean Leopold Dominique, and it was 1 year before the first promised elections. And I had visited Haiti and become so tactile. I fell in love with the country and with the people and the culture, and also with this amazing sense of the promise of democracy in a country that had not had democracy for such a long time. And I thought, wow, if we could make a documentary and capture the spirit, Americans could learn a lot from it. People all over the world could learn a lot about this sense of of people really passionately wanting to create a better society for the children and future generations. So we went back, and our thing was who's leading the charge here? Who's really on the front line, kind of speaking to this upcoming democracy and what we should do? And Radio Haiti came up again and again and again. Oh, we have to talk to Jean Dominique. So we requested to go on, and we actually were there on the anniversary of the departure of Baby Doc. And now I got to meet this guy that everybody was talking about. And honestly, I just thought this is the most charismatic, amazing human being I've ever come across. His wife's quite interesting too, but this guy, and as a filmmaker, honestly and truly, I thought, oh yeah, I really want to get to know this guy somehow, because someday I'll have a film and I can cast Jean Dominique in a part in this film. He will win an Academy Award for his performance, and then I will get to dine out on the fact that I discovered this guy in Haiti. So when Jean and Michèle and Gigi went into exile after the coup, and I found out that Jean and Michèle were in New York, I was able to contact him and say, can I make a documentary about a journalist in exile? You. And we could do monthly interviews, and during that time you can update us on the progress to unseat the coup. And you can also perhaps talk about Haitian history and your life or whatever. And then, when the coup leaders are vanquished and democracy or the promise of democracy returns, we can go down and film the journalist back on the air. And we can have a kind of a human rights film with a positive, upbeat ending. And Jean Dominique said, I don't think that sounds very interesting, but I have nothing to do here in New York, really, except think about what's going on, so okay, I'll meet you once a month. So we did that, and my agenda was like, wow, we're becoming friends. This is exactly what I hoped for. I don't really care about this documentary that much. I think it's an interesting idea, but I'm getting to know Jean Dominique. So then the coup leaders were unseated, and Jean, Michèle, and Gigi, and others returned to Haiti. So me and my team went down, and we started filming, and oh my God, they completely destroyed the station. They completely destroyed the transmitter. It was just nothing. They were really starting from scratch again. And we were there every day with our cameras, and kind of interviewing Jean, following him around. And after about a week and a half of this, I got a message that Jean wanted to, he summoned me to his house at 5 a.m. The next morning for coffee. And I was like, okay, and don't bring your camera. So I went over, and Jean said, listen, Jonathan, I'm fed up. I can't stand it. Every time I turn around, there's some camera shooting at my ass. I'm trying to get this station back on the air. You must stop. It's over. And anyway, if you really were going to make a documentary about me, it wouldn't be about me at the radio station. It would be me out in the countryside, working with the peasants, with the farmers, because really, I'm not really a journalist. I'm an agronomist. I think he says something like that also. So I was like, okay, because by now, we're great friends, and mission accomplished. All I need is the script that has a part for him, and we'll go. So I go back to New York, and then we started getting the phone calls one morning that Jean had been killed, shot down outside of Radio Haiti. And I have to say, because I love this country so much, and love Jean so much, and I was like, that's it. If they killed Jean, that's it. There's no hope. There's no hope. And I was walking my daughter to elementary school with my friend Daniel Wolf, and I was walking his kid to school. And as we walked home, I said, Daniel, that's it. There's this sort of desire that we have to help Haiti. It's futile. It's pointless now. And God bless Daniel Wolf, as he said, well, we could complete our film about Jean. So I called up Michèle, and we knew that Radio Haiti had shut down for 1 month after the assassination, and they were going to go back on the air. And I said, Michèle, can we film you going back on the air? And Michèle said, yes. So we went down there, and I have to say, in the scene of Michèle driving from her home to the station that morning, I'm sitting in the front seat with my camera, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? This is so gigantic, And we got there, and we did film the station going back on the air. And then later, when Jean's ashes were scattered, we wanted them to be scattered in the Artibonite, which is where he said we'd have to really go to make a film about him. The film went to the Artibonite. And we didn't, imagine that there'd be an audience. We didn't imagine it. All we collectively knew was we had to finish that film. And we did. And then people started seeing it. We showed it to sisters. We loved it. We had a brilliant editor, Lizzie Gilbert, who, by the way, told me, I showed her our footage, and she said, well, this is great, Jonathan, but if you want to make a film about Jean Dominique, you really have to tell not only his story, but the story of Haiti. And I was like, oh my God, can we do that? And she said, yes, we'll get archival footage. And I said, okay, let's go. So anyway, people started seeing the film, and they were very moved by it. And that was many years ago. And yet, look, here we are tonight in Durham, and we've gathered here, and we're still seeing it, and Jean's voice is still alive. And it's such a beautiful thing. I can't believe my good fortune to have stumbled into this thing. And of course, then working with Michèle and with Gigi afterwards, because Jean was the dominant guy for me. He was Jean. So then after that, then we got to become great friends. So it's been just a glorious experience for me, and thanks for having us.
Gigi, do you want to say anything? No. Okay. It's emotional.
I'm sorry, I don't speak English.
Actually, she does, but she's shy.
She's shy.
She'll use your word.
I think I may open it up for questions. I did want to just say something since you brought up the Radio Haiti. I do want to acknowledge there's several people in the audience. Zeke Graves, who is the one who's been digitizing a lot of the material.
Oh, yeah, Zeke, where are you?
His technical expertise is sort of saving these materials. We went and visited him today. So Megan Bonnell, who constructed really the website that we're using. And then Laura Wagner, who, as was described, is kind of the soul of the project, who's poured her so much energy into this and made it happen. And Sandy Blaze, who's also in writing and working on the project. So a lot of people went into making I'm sorry, Sandy. Making it so the website would go live, and of course we're launching now. Of course, there's all kinds of staff in the Duke Library, Patrick Stowski, Kat, and others who are making this happen, and we did just receive an NEH grant to make this possible, so there'll be this project will be really going forward, and the whole radio station will be on air, not too long. The other thing I wanted to say is that you had asked you wanted to open up with a question about why that child at the end of the film.
Yeah, I was curious about that.
And you wanted to raise that. So.
The other thing I want to say about the archive is that, if you've seen the film, so you've got a taste of Jean, and a taste of Jean, the microphone. But I have to say, I can't imagine that there's more of a brilliant, world-class radio journalist that's ever been on the planet than Jean Dominique. And his editorials, his analysis of everything from films and art to the political situation in Haiti to the global political situation. This thinker was a brilliant genius, and you can hear how beautifully he used his voice. So these archives, it's like the greatest radio journalism archive on the planet, and it's right here at Duke. I'm so excited. The work you all are doing is just like so extraordinary. One tape at a time, right, Zeke?
Thank you. So maybe I'll now open it up for questions. I think Jacques will go around with microphones if you don't mind using them. If you want to, comments, questions, reactions to continue the conversation.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
My thing as a child growing up in Haiti, I would say Radio Haiti was probably the first radio station that I listened to. But what really touched me is that the way that for me I took Jean Dominique's death was almost like when Kennedy died or when Martin Luther King died, because that's what it meant for me or for many of my friends and things like that. My question to Michèle is that interview Jean gave with Aristide, the one that turned into whatever. I hate to ask you to stipulate on anything, but do you think that
Well, I think definitely the fact that Jean was denouncing corruption, the fact that Jean had been one of the strongest supporters of a return to democracy in Haiti, which in that case meant in 1990 the election of Jean-Bertrand Aristide to the presidency. The fact that Jean, when he came back in 1994, continued to do his job as a journalist, which meant no matter what his sympathy, where his sympathies lied, he felt he had to keep on denouncing corruption, which he was doing under Duvalier, and he felt that he had to continue to do his job as journalist. Whether some people within the Famille Lavalas party did not appreciate this, I think it became obvious with the way the whole investigation went, because I have to say that from the start, several paths were followed by the investigation. They followed the Duvalier path, they followed the high bourgeoisie path, they followed different possibilities of people who would have wanted Jean dead. And more, and the result we have today, leading to those 9 people, is the path that has been slow, but has steadily brought the same people back on the front. So to me, whether that had to do with Jean's death, I cannot speculate. I can only say that obviously there was a problem between at least some members of the Famille Lavalas party and Jean Dominique.
But well, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was an article on one of those news media that said that named Aristide as one of the people behind. I mean, it wasn't like maybe, it was just like he should be indicted. You know, I mean, it was just like, just in the past months.
Well, actually, the judge stopped short of indicting Aristide. He heard Aristide the way he heard René Préval, and the way he heard a number of witnesses, or at least people who testified on the case. The fact that he felt he didn't have enough proof, because the only thing he had linking Aristide to the actual assassination was the words of Auriel Jean, who was the former security chief in the National Palace. And he felt that while Auriel Jean, when he talked about, for instance, Senator Myrlande Libérus, who is accused of being the mastermind behind the killing.
What was his name?
Her name, Myrlande Libérus, the senator. And the judge felt that he had at least the testimonies of Auriel Jean, where Auriel Jean said, "This is what the senator told me." So she was indicted. In fact, she was first invited to come over and testify herself. She refused. She's in Miami right now, and there is a request to the US government to extradite her to Haiti. Whether I have no proof that Jean-Bertrand Aristide is involved in the assassination of Jean Dominique. What I do know is that there are a number of influential members of his party who there are some strong reason to believe that they were implicated.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yes, sure.
Because there's another level to this that I think is quite profound. Jean Dominique loved Jean-Bertrand Aristide, loved him, as we all did. And Jean-Bertrand Aristide adored Jean Dominique. Jean Dominique was TT's hero. When he was elected, he called Jean and said, "Jean, will you be my Minister of Information?" And Jean said, "Number one, I couldn't be in your cabinet because I don't wear socks. So if I came to the palace without socks, it would be a problem. Second of all, I can be much more helpful to you in your agenda by staying outside the government and criticizing you and pushing you and giving you that voice." So in fact, we went to the wedding together, and the love there was just authentic and deep and abiding. And when my theory, I mean, Jean didn't tell me this, and we haven't really discussed it very much, but when Jean did that interview with Aristide, now he's not president anymore. I feel that Jean, with all his brilliance, was an idealist such an extent that he felt that now that he could talk to this guy who had been so problematic, now that he's not in office anymore, he can help Aristide unburden and kind of confess and liberate himself in terms of how things have gone awry. And asking those questions, every question that Jean posed to Aristide was an opportunity for Aristide to be honest and to win the respect of the people again through his candor. And he went instead to these awful metaphors. And then Jean was engaged in the thing. But there was this moment of, I'm convinced that Jean thought he was giving Aristide the greatest gift ever to kind of cleanse himself from all that corruption. And the other thing is this, you have to realize that, you know, when you have, when you're the leader of a political party, especially one as huge as Lavalas, which just took the country by storm in a way that I don't think is even paralleled anywhere, you know, you don't invite people in. People start jumping in. And you've got people identifying themselves as Lavalas now who may be bitter enemies and completely politically and philosophically diametrically opposed to Aristide, but now they're inside Lavalas. So Aristide had no control over Lavalas. My own outsider opinion is that I'm disappointed in Aristide because I sort of feel that whether or not he ordered the death of Jean, which is unimaginable to me, he could have protected Jean, convinced that he could have protected Jean, and he failed to do so.
First of all, thank you all so much for being here. Merci un peu pour perspective, présence nous ici, à Soya. My research is on the connection between radio activism and language rights in Haiti. So for me, this was really fascinating. And of course, my question is related to this. So I was wondering what impact you think Jean's and Radio Haitien's legacies have on the fight for human rights and for popular participation in Haiti today. Qui qualité influence nous pensez héritage Jean à Radio Haiti intervient sous toi mon la participation populaire jeudi en Haïti? Thank you.
Sur quelle influence Jean a eu, la radio a eu sur
Good
la
question.
participation et les droits de l'homme en Haïti. Well, I think there are several layers to that question. And I think what you're talking about, which is, you know, the access of, for instance, a Creole-speaking public to matters of public concern. Radio Haiti was really the first station to actually put news in Creole and actually give our microphones to the majority of people in Haiti who for 2 centuries had never had a chance to speak out. Language played a lot in it. The fact that Creole, we had as many news programs in Creole as we do in French, and as you probably know, French was the language, the only language of the media at the time. After 1986 and the overthrow, we started this way before. After 1986 and the overthrow of Duvalier, people who had gotten used to actually speak out, even on matters that were not political, strictly, because you could not actually ask about political issues under Jean-Claude Duvalier, nor of course François Duvalier. But the fact that Creole had become a tool in which people felt they were involved in what was happening, I think had a decisive effect on what happened after that in 1986, when actually people starting, in fact, what happened in 1986, we were no longer alone. After 1986, we had journalists, came out of the soil like, wild mushrooms after the rain. There was, and so many stations started doing news in Creole. But Radio Haiti did, I think, a very important, had a very important impact because we actually said it was okay to speak Creole. And you can't imagine how, we did, for instance, we brought, by bringing, for instance, international news in Creole, we actually helped create a consciousness of the majority of people about the dictatorship. You know, when our Creole newscasters were talking about Somoza and talking about describing him as having a mâchoire a round jaw, to most people it described Jean-Claude Duvalier, who was a bit, you know, chubby and had a round jaw. And talking about the fall of Somoza, you cannot imagine what it meant. And we understood it so much that for radio station was didn't have, you know, that much in terms of financial means. We had a reporter in Managua when the Sandinistas came in, and to us, talking about it under Duvalier was saying dictatorships can fall. And so I think getting people involved in the language that was their own, for the first time also covering regions of the country that had never been heard before, giving microphones to coffee growers or to rice growers, having them, for instance, it's not political, but it was highly political. When you go to a coffee grower in the Grand'Anse and you go to the coffee grower in Marmelade and ask them about simply the price that was paid for the coffee by the spéculateur, the middleman. For the first time, people were comparing. They were seeing the profit being made over them. And I think we played, I think, an important role at the time, which was really helped after '86 by a number of other radio stations. And I have to say that beyond '86, we were committed, even though Jean had a private radio station. But, you know, we would, for instance, give a reporter 2 weeks to cover, for instance, an event, a peasant event, or a peasant problem. Right now on the site we have, for instance, the massacre of Jean Rabel, which was probably the biggest massacre of peasants in recent Haitian history. The fact that we chose to cover that, and at the time we were the only one. And I think there was also a Catholic radio station following what was happening, except that the Catholic Church was part of the problem. We happened to bring kind of an independent voice in the sense that we had different sides to the story. And we gave our microphone to the big landowners as we did to the peasants. And when the massacre occurred, we were the first one to report about you know, people being killed, how many were killed, how many were in hospitals being pursued by other peasant groups which were paid by the big landowners. So I take one example to show you that I think we did play a role because of a choice. And it was a choice that Jean made, that even though it was his private radio station, he was not going to just cover news that was important to people selling soap or doing advertisement on the radio station about, you know, different Toyota. So that's what I think I can say about this. I don't know if I answer your question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madame Montas, I'd like you to, it may be difficult for you to talk about it, but Radio Haiti, after disparition of Dominique, was still alive. And I would like to ask you what happened. Why did you close the radio station a few years after? And what's happened in that day? Christmas Day, in the incident, modern incident, the attentat at your house, that was the second time for us. Was Jean Dominique was that second time?
I have to say that first, coming back on the air after Jean was killed and Jonathan was there, I wouldn't have done it personally if it was not for this person right here. Gigi told me we owe it to Jean to continue. I got together with Gigi and the journalist at the radio station, and I said, what happened is impacting all of our lives. You know it's dangerous business. Do you want to continue? One of the reporters got up. His name is Gregory Casimir. He's now, he has his own community radio now. He said to me, Michèle, if you could cross that courtyard where Jean's body was and tell us that you want to continue, you are the captain of the team, we'll follow you. You know, with commitments like this, we had to continue. And we did. We did a month later, as Jonathan mentioned, we did start again. And I have to say that, you know, my support in this was Gigi. And the team really was there. Until that day you mentioned, which was Christmas Day 2002. I just, you know, gone to a Christmas dinner at Gigi's. I'm coming home, and for a reason that I still don't know why, I changed route. And I went around a block of buildings to arrive at my house, not following the road I followed usually. And there were two men waiting for me in the corner. As soon as the car came in, they started rushing towards the station, toward my house. And I have to say that one young, beautiful man was my bodyguard, was standing outside, and he saw the men arriving. And he said to another guard, he says, close that door, except that he was outside. He was shot dead. And in fact, he did one heroic thing. He ran away from the house. And which means that, you know, after shooting at the house for a while in front of a closed gate, those people went down after Maxime, and Maxime was killed a little further. As you could see, Jonathan's film is dedicated to two people. Jean-Claude Louisin was killed at the same time as Jean Dominique, and Maxime Saïd, who died protecting me. After that, and I think it happened when we were at the funeral, Maxime Saïd's funeral, Gigi is the one who told me, now we can no longer continue, we are putting people in danger. And that's why we decided to close. It was painful. When we decided that, we didn't know whether we were going to start over again. But we also realized that, you know, when we met with the team and I said, I want to close the station, then they started telling us the threats they had been receiving. This one had to leave his house because his mother kicked him out. That other one was being divorced by his wife because he was working at Radio Haiti. So we realized it was an untenable situation. At the time, the government told us, stay, at the time it was Jean-Bertrand Aristide back in power. And the Prime Minister called me and said to me, we'll protect your journalists and we'll put all of you in a motel and protect the motel. I said, big deal. How are you going to protect a journalist who's actually doing his job in the street? So to us, it was an impossible situation. It was really an impossible situation, and we had to close. We didn't enjoy doing it, no. But we felt that enough people had died. That's all.
So since, can you hear me?
Yes.
Is this just going to the...
I just wanted to see you.
So since I know how to work a press conference, I'll try to cram two totally totally separate questions into one. The first question I had is, given the political situation in Haiti right now, there aren't a lot of people in a lot of fields who would say that the current administration has done a whole lot for the rule of law. But since this particular case that we're talking about implicates a number of people who, if not including former President Aristide, at least go up to the ranks of Lavalas, I was wondering if you were finding the current administration more amenable to seeing this case go forward than perhaps the Preval administration was before. And then the second part of that question, or separate question depending on how you choose to look at it, is given the fact that freedom of the press is being curtailed again in Haiti in a way that we haven't seen for a couple of decades, do you see any journalists in Haiti today, you can choose to name them or generalize, who are doing the work that Jean did in a previous generation vis-a-vis the current administration of Mr. Martin?
The first question about the political circumstances right now. A lot of people have asked me the question differently, saying, do I feel that the current administration is using the Jean Dominique case politically to block Lavalas, for instance? My answer to that is, from the day Jean was killed, people have tried to pull that cover on them. They have all tried to use the case politically. Lavalas did it, a different government have done it, and all of them, I think, have been really flabbergasted by the fact that this is still on. I mean, the whole judicial case is still alive. And if they can't stop it, they try to use it. Whether they are trying to use the Jean Dominique case right now against Aristide, it's a possibility. Both Gigi and I have often talked about this. We don't care. What we care about is that we get to the truth. And to me, that says it. I realize that it is a political case. I realize that in this specific issue, we have had the other investigations against Famille Lavalas. And I want to say something about what Jonathan said. There is a big difference between the Lavalas movement, which in 1990 brought Jean-Bertrand Aristide to power, and Famille Lavalas, which is the party that said that Jean-Bertrand Aristide was head of the party for life, which is something we fought against under Duvalier, that anyone would be in for life in any position whatsoever. So, it's just to tell you that, different circumstances have really surrounded that case. That case is alive after how many governments? I don't know, 5 or 6. And what was your other question, Jonathan? I'm sorry.
If there are journalists in Haiti today,
Yeah.
I think there are some who are trying. I think what I found is that there is, listening to Haitian radios, there is very little investigative reporting of the type we were doing. But I think it's not, I don't think it's as much about political, curtailing political, freedom of the press, as it is coming from the radio, the ownership of the radio stations. People were saying, why should we cover what is happening in the Artibonite? Because suddenly we are back into the Republic of Port-au-Prince, and everything has to happen in Port-au-Prince. We had something in our newsroom which I haven't found after we left. We would have our newsroom meetings in the morning, and I would look at the menu. We had this press conference here, that press conference there, and then I would say enough, and I would tell the reporters, bring me some front page news about the rest of the country. Okay, I don't think this is prevalent right now. There are a few radio stations who are trying one or two radio stations who are trying to shed a little more light on what is happening. But the type of analysis that Jean was doing, I don't see it. No, I don't.
Are any of the Radio Haiti alumni on the air at other stations today?
Yes, they are. They are.
Probably have time for maybe one more question, and then we'll. Yes.
Thank you very much. Very much. I've seen this documentary about 5 times, and And the next question is kind of a piggyback question regarding language and human rights and the effect that Radio Haiti had on language and the ability to express in Creole. And so one of my questions that I think is from the perspective that you've had with contact with this large population is what was your understanding of Haiti's relationship with language in general, whether it was Spanish, where you had to have people qualified to really to bring in a Haitian understanding of the world as well. And so I'm interested in how you understood Haitians talking back in French or Creole and what that bilingualism was also there for, and your decision on how important French was also to Haitians who were of all education levels. And so it's less kind of a political question about language and what's be spoken, but just your experience and seeing what the role other languages also had there that were not necessarily colonial.
The music.
One for you and one for me, right?
Okay.
So that means Japanese, Spanish, how did you see that coming into, this radio station?
The music first?
Sure. Give you a chance to think about the more complicated question. Thank you for seeing the film so many times. You haven't seen it as many times as I have, but you're doing really well. That was a very exciting part of the process, was when we finally had the picture locked, and I felt that it was very important that the documentary have a very dynamic musical presence, and I was a big Wyclef Jean fan, and I knew that Clef lived and had a studio in New York. So I reached out to him, I told him what was going on, and even though he hadn't lived in Haiti for a long time, he really grew up in America, but he knew who Jean Leopold was, he knew about Radio Haiti, and I showed him the film, and he was tremendously moved by it. And he said, I'd love to do the score for this film. And I said, well, that's a dream come true for me, and by the way, I can't pay you anything. This is a total, labor of love for everybody concerned. And he said, no problem whatsoever. He wanted to do it. And the process was simple. We would meet. He was working on an album at night, and we would meet at about 10 or 11 in the morning, and we'd watch that much of the film, for 10-minute stretch, or whatever, until we got to a point which either I or Clef thought could benefit from music. And then on the spot, nothing was ever written, none of the music was ever written. Then on the spot, Clef would, play it again, and his very, very strong musical partner, Jerry, one who plays, would start laying down a little bass, and Clef would either pick up a guitar or go to the drum kit and start doing something, and signal the engineer would start rolling, and then we'd back up. Let's go again, and now they'd pick up other instruments, and then another layer, and then at a certain point we're like, yeah, that's great, and we worked our way through the whole film that way, and it was a great experience, and I think, honestly, I think that's part of it, because Clef, like embraced his Haitian identity, very strongly, but he really knew very little about Haiti at the time. He would tell you this himself. I'm not talking behind his back. And I think that the process of working on the Jean Dominique story really turned Wyclef on, because shortly thereafter he started going to Haiti and getting involved. Eventually, of course, he ran for president. He would have done a better job than Sweet Mickey, I'll say that much. So that was really, really exciting and wonderful. So then, by the way, then we got a phone call from one day from Sony Corporation, which handled all Clef's publishing. And they said, okay, our invoice is in the mail to you, $1 million for the music. And there are people at these corporations that are paid to do that. And Clef, really went toe-to-toe with them very quickly, made that go away. So he did the whole thing as a labor of love. And I'm so proud of that. Yeah. Okay, talk about.
No, that's a difficult question, because I think it implies not just Creole, not just the language, but about the, the politics of a post-colonial, post-slavery country over the last 2 centuries. It was not just about Creole, it was also about Vodou. And when Jean started Radio Haiti, those were, Vodou, for instance, was a completely taboo subject. You just did not talk about it. It was supposed to be a Catholic country. It was supposed to be a French-speaking country. Everyone knows it wasn't true. But you know how ambivalent Haitians still remain today about language. What is important is that in the last few, let's say the last 30 years, there has been an evolution where Creole right now is not just the language of publicity, it's the language of interviews, the language of news, it's a language, and it has really won its place. There are still some, of course, you mentioned Spanish. I don't think that goes into the equation, because the equation was French Creole, was Port-au-Prince versus the countryside, was the Haitian Catholic bourgeoisie versus the Vodou majority of peasants. So it's the politics of language is very closely linked to the social relationships, the social realities of Haiti.
The educational system.
The education system, people, a lot of my, Gigi was editing the Creole for our reporters. Our reporters were Creole speaking, but had gone to schools that were in French. They would come to the station where they had to, when you covered a story, you had to do 2 reporting. One in Creole, one in French. The Creole one for the news segments in French, and one in one in Creole for the news in Creole, and vice versa. The news in French, they had to do the reporting in French. But very often they would tell you, we wrote first the one in French because it was easier. And the first language was Creole, because they never learned to read and write it. This is why I'm saying that we should have our website also in French, because a lot of Creole-speaking Haitians who have gone to school in a French system, and they cannot read Creole or write Creole. And since Jonathan mentioned Wycliffe, we have one when Jonathan decided to do a Creole version of The Agronomist. Wycliffe did Jean's voice. And when Gigi wrote the script in Creole, which was the translation of the script in English, and we brought the script to Wycliffe, he looked at it and says, "What are you doing to me? I can't read this." So I actually had to read the Creole for him, and he would repeat after me that same sentence.
And he did it.
And he did it. So it's to tell you the problem that exists in the relationship between the 2 languages. Even though we do say that langue maman, the language of our mother, is Creole, but at the same time, the majority of Haitians who go to school in a French system. So I don't know whether I answered your question.
Michèle, what about the judicial system?
Oh, the judicial system, you have an amazing reality where people are being tried in a language they don't understand. I covered one session of the criminal courts in Haiti where one young woman was being tried for having supposedly killed her husband, who was a drunk, and just because she threw 3 little pebbles at him. So they said that the rocks killed him. The woman was being tried in French. The lawyers would speak French. The prosecutor would speak French. The judge would speak French. She testified in Creole, but she could absolutely not understand what was being said about her. And this is the type of judicial system that we have.
Is it still, did that change in '87 with the new constitution? Or?
Well, theoretically, according to the new constitution, we have 2 languages in Haiti, which is Creole and French. Everything should be written in both languages. But, you know, except for my passport, I don't think there are very many things written in the 2 languages.
Wow.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you
much
all
for
so
being
much.
here.
Thank you, all of you.
Si ve no la